Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs will come to order. Welcome to our witnesses. We face an uncertain world with many geopolitical challenges, from Russia's continued brutal invasion of Ukraine to ongoing conflicts in the Middle East to an increasingly aggressive and capable Chinese military. We know that China's built that military capability with the help of some of America's biggest corporations and even American tax dollars. For too long, our government was willfully blind to the threat China posed. Multinational corporations eager to move jobs wherever they could pay ever lower wages lobbied this body, and presidents of both parties failed us for permanent normal trade relations with China. When corporations move products overseas, they outsource the technology and the trade secrets along with it. We did nothing to stop it, and now we're paying the price. We can't make the kinds of mistakes we have in the past. We have to be proactive about these threats and take action now to protect our national and economic security. We need to be clear. Those two issues are intimately connected. You can't separate the economy and our national security. Today, hostile governments work together more and more to challenge the interests and the securities and the values of the United States, our allies and partners around the world. Increasingly, hostile governments use our own technology to fuel their destructive efforts. We must lead efforts to stop it. It's the U.S. government's job to police the flow of sensitive and so-called dual-use technologies. Technologies can be used for both military and civilian purposes. The Departments of Commerce and Treasury, along with DOD, state, and other agencies, try to restrict the flow of sensitive technologies to our adversaries. We can't allow U.S. innovation and investments to be used against us. Against that backdrop, NATO met earlier this month. They issued a statement addressing these threats. Specifically, NATO leaders called on China to, quote, cease all material and political support to Russia's war effort, including, quote, the transfer of dual-use materials such as weapons, components, equipment, and raw materials that serve as inputs for Russia's defense sector. That was the NATO statement. That followed last month's G7 summit in Italy, where the United States and our allies reaffirmed our shared efforts to implement export controls to address risks to international security and, quote, to ensure the effectiveness of our respective foreign investment screening. The G7 leaders also noted that measures designed to address risks from outbound investments could be important to complement existing tools of targeted controls on exports and outbound investments. A core element of this committee's work has been to establish and conduct oversight over our export controls, investment securities, and Defense Production Act authorities. Treasury and Commerce have had active and growing caseloads since our hearing last year. They've expanded controls on semiconductors, equipment, and services that could support China's semiconductor ecosystem. They've taken steps to establish an outbound investment program that would enable us to better understand and to stop U.S. investments that build up China's military. They recently issued a proposed rule that would significantly expand the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S.'s ability to review foreign real estate investments near military bases like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and Yars in Ohio. It's the kind of action I and many from both parties have been pressing for. I hear from farmers in Ohio near our military installations who are very concerned about this. As we use our export control and investment security policies to restrict China's ability to use U.S. technology and investments to advance their military capabilities and human rights abuses, we must also bolster our own domestic capabilities. To that end, I was pleased to see Dr. Taylor Calais and her colleagues thank you release the Defense Department's first ever National Defense Industrial Strategy earlier this year. As a critical economic security tool, this committee has jurisdiction over the Defense Production Act, which must play a vital role in advancing that strategy. In Ohio, we know the potential here to harness the talents and patriotism of America's workers to protect our country. For decades, the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton has been the home of the DPA Title III program. Aside from the good work being done at AFRL, the Defense Production Act gives the administration the authority to allocate and prioritize critical materials and to increase domestic productive capacity to address industrial shortfalls. In other words, DPA allows the Defense Department and other agencies to invest in American manufacturing that can support U.S. national security as well as making us more prepared for emergencies. This work couldn't be more urgent. For decades, corporate offshoring and consolidation and restructuring, essentially just another elite business school term for finding new ways to screw workers to increase profits, all weakened our domestic manufacturing sector. Let me say that again. For decades, corporate offshoring, consolidation, and restructuring, all with the aid and assistance of too many members of this body, all weakened our domestic manufacturing sector. Ohioans know well what it's done to cities like where I grew up, Mansfield, our families, our economy. Increasingly, people in this town finally are waking up to how it's weakened our national security. We know when companies outsource jobs, they outsource technological capabilities with them. There's not been enough appreciation for how much innovation happens on the production floor by workers. Over the past few years, we've finally taken steps to reverse that course, passing CHIPS and Science Act, passing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We've increased funding for strategic investments using the Defense Production Act. We can do more. As Congress prepares to reauthorize the Defense Production Act, we need to look at new ways that DPA can support American industrial capabilities and help us revitalize our domestic industrial base to meet current and future challenges. Today, we'll discuss how we're working with our partners to coordinate our export controls and investment security policies and what steps Congress can take to strengthen these authorities. We look forward to testimony from this panel who can update the committee on their important work. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start by reminding this room and our witnesses of the important role they play in safeguarding our nation's economic and national security priorities. President Reagan once rightly noted that we are in a different world, and our defenses must be based on recognition and awareness to combat our enemies of the modern day. While he was talking about the Soviets, unfortunately, many of our adversaries remain the same: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. But thankfully, what also remains the same is the American spirit to innovate and to create the world's leading technologies. My home state of South Carolina is an excellent example. From F-16s to the world's best luxury airliners, to leading automotive manufacturing, to creating next-generation technologies, I'd say South Carolina is simply our future. But to safeguard that future, we must ensure that policies created here in Washington don't cut off growth and stifle future innovation. We must have a global economy where America is the leader. After more than 3 years of President Biden's policies, we have seen soaring inflation that is crushing everyday Americans, wars across our globe, and our enemies challenging us and our allies at every single turn. We can and we must, frankly, do better. So today, as we discuss and evaluate some of our economic national security tools, our export controls, investment security, and the Defense Production Act, we must keep these principles in mind. At times, we must be willing to reassess our policies and retool our positions. And frankly, let's consider our allies. One thing we certainly learned through COVID was depending on China is a really bad strategy. To be effective in countering China, we must work with our allies so that China cannot easily find workarounds to our U.S. export controls by simply buying these same technologies and equipment from our friends. A failure to look holistically at our economic strategy can and will damage American security, competitiveness, and unfairly leave U.S.-led industry behind. In fact, a recent study by the New York Federal Reserve found that the Biden administration's export control policies on the semiconductor industry have led to decreased profitability, job losses, and $130 billion in financial loss across the industry. With new reports that these types of policies have directly led to thousands of layoffs in states ranging from Ohio to New York, we must scrutinize the actions leading to these results. But it doesn't stop there. In my home state of South Carolina, recent actions by the Commerce Department to revoke thousands of export licenses for gun manufacturers have resulted in millions of dollars in losses. I've sent 3 letters to the Commerce Department on this issue, and now reports suggest that we will see over $500 million in annual losses across U.S. firearm manufacturers. Mr. Chairman, I have a letter here that I would like to submit for the record.
Objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my home state of South Carolina, a small minority-owned firearms business had more than $71 million worth of export licenses revoked by the Biden Commerce Department. Unfortunately, this meant that the firm defaulted on multiple international contracts, and now those same contracts are being backfilled by China and others. And it is my understanding that these licenses were revoked for foreign policy reasons, such as furtherance of world peace. So instead of supporting American companies, we just handed over the marketplace to China. Export controls, investment security, and important tools like the Defense Production Act should be used in a responsible manner that maximizes growth here at home and economic pain for our adversaries. I strongly believe that when we have a better domestic environment, a better ability to innovate and manufacture, that means that America is winning. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing these important issues with our witnesses.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Witnesses today, 2 of them have been in front of our committee before. 2 new witnesses, thank you for joining us. Taya Kindler is Assistant Secretary for Export Administration at the Commerce Department. Paul Rosen's Assistant Secretary for Investment Security at the Department of the Treasury. Grant Harris, Assistant Secretary for Industry Analysis, Department of Commerce. Dr. Laura Taylor-Kale is the Assistant Secretary for Industrial Base Policy at the Department of Defense. Thank you, all 4 of you, for your public service, and welcome, and you're recognized. Ms. Kindler.
Thank you, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify about the Biden-Harris administration's ongoing efforts to administer export controls in protection of U.S. national security interests. I appreciate the opportunity to work together with you to ensure we're effectively countering China's military modernization and human rights abuses, degrading Russia's ability to wage war on Ukraine, identifying and controlling technologies that are critical to our national security, and collaborating with our allies and partners in these efforts. BIS does not take on these tasks alone. License applications and licensing policy are adjudicated and set together with the Departments of Commerce, Defense, Energy, and State. Our greatest priority is to effectively apply export controls to thwart China's military modernization efforts. We know that China is going to great lengths to obtain key U.S. advanced technologies with military potential, and we're responding accordingly, as demonstrated by our October 2022 and 2023 advanced computing controls. These restrictions aim to impede China's ability to develop artificial intelligence systems used for the development of advanced weapons systems, malicious cyber activity, and other military and intelligence applications. With our interagency partners, we closely scrutinize license applications to the PRC, focusing on end users and end uses, as well as risk of diversion to unauthorized activities. We're not afraid to take the time we need to carefully analyze applications involving PRC parties to assess any and all risks to U.S. national security and foreign policy. Just this morning, we released new proposals to expand restrictions on exports and the provision of support to military, intelligence, and foreign security end users and end uses consistent with the FY23 NDAA. This includes controls on U.S. person support to such activities in China. And last week, we took action to ensure strong U.S. leadership in the development of standards for critical and emerging technologies. Through an export controls rulemaking, we enabled increased U.S. private sector participation in standard-setting organizations. This undercuts any advantage China could establish in the absence of U.S. industry participation. At the same time, our commitment to working with allies and partners on export controls has never been stronger. Export controls are more effective when used in concert with our partners and allies. We're in the process of finalizing controls now on new critical and emerging technologies, including quantum, and some of our allies and partners have already taken parallel action. We continue to surge forward in common controls against Russia with our 38 global export control coalition partners. Earlier this month, I was in Brussels meeting with counterparts from the European Commission, Japan, and the United Kingdom to discuss combined efforts to enhance the controls we imposed on Russia in response to its attacks on Ukraine. We've also coordinated outreach to third countries outside of our coalition to more forcefully combat illegal diversion. Alongside our tireless commitment to control the export of U.S. technologies, BIS is deeply dedicated to ensuring the health of our defense industrial base. Through the critical tools provided by the Defense Production Act, we work alongside interagency partners to ensure that critical Department of Defense and emergency procurement needs are met. Our DPA authorities also enable us to issue highly confidential and bespoke surveys to industry participants, informing our use of export controls and interagency approaches to national security issues. Reauthorization of the DPA is critical for BIS's support to our defense industrial base. Dual-use export controls have never been more necessary to our national security. We in Export Administration at the Commerce Department are focused on aggressively contending with the national security threats facing our country and using all the tools at our disposal to ensure we maintain U.S. technological leadership in furtherance of national security. Finally, while I recognize that this is not an appropriations committee, I urge you to support additional funding for BIS. We're facing more sophisticated threats from China, Russia, Iran, rapid advances in technology, increasing complexity of export license applications, and more critical and emerging technologies subject to our controls. To outpace these threats, we need to resource our mission appropriately. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Taya. Thank you, Secretary Rosen.
Chairman Brown, good morning. Ranking Member Scott, good morning. And members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the work of the Department of the Treasury's Office of Investment Security and the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS. I also want to thank Congress for the authorities and resources you have provided since the passage of the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018, or FIRMA, as well as the constructive and bipartisan support you have provided to our national security mission, which has helped make possible many of the enhancements I will discuss here today. Last year, I spoke to this committee about our work and the progress we've made to safeguard national security. And today, I'd like to update you on these efforts, which have been extensive and ongoing. Over the past 18 months, we have strengthened our analytical and operational capabilities by building and implementing sophisticated tools, platforms, and methodologies for assessing and addressing national security risks, employing cutting-edge information technology platforms to securely manage and facilitate novel aspects of CFIUS's work, and expanding and deepening our human capital to build a team with diverse backgrounds. These improvements have enabled us to be more efficient and effective, even as we contend with two core challenges. Transactions are becoming more complex and sophisticated in their structures, and CFIUS is identifying and addressing more national security risks than in years past. We have paid particular attention to the role of limited partners in investment funds, as their access to, influence, and control over sensitive businesses can vary considerably. All while tackling these challenges, Treasury has successfully improved the efficiency of CFIUS's operations. As noted in the latest annual report, in 2023, CFIUS cleared 66% of filed declarations or notices within the first 30 or 45 days, respectively, compared to 58% in 2022. The rate at which parties withdrew and refiled their notices also declined from 23% to 18%, the first such decrease in 5 years. These changes are not incidental, but reflect improved efficiencies, which is a cornerstone of our focus. Treasury has also transformed the way the committee approaches compliance with mitigation agreements and enforcement thereof. We've expanded and devoted significant resources to the monitoring and enforcement mission, including by nearly doubling the size of Treasury's team over the last several years. We have also continued to enforce violations of mitigation agreements where appropriate, In fact, in 2023, CFIUS imposed 4 civil monetary penalties for violations of material provisions of mitigation agreements, which was double the number of civil monetary penalties that CFIUS had previously imposed in nearly its 50-year history. CFIUS has also, for the first time, issued subpoenas pursuant to its authority to execute its national security mission. We have expanded our efforts to identify transactions that were not notified to the committee voluntarily and that may pose a risk to national security. The committee leverages multiple tools to identify and analyze such non-notified transactions. And Treasury's non-notified team screens thousands of potential covered transactions, ultimately putting forth to the committee for consideration to request to file those transactions that may pose a national security risk or issues. The Mine One transaction that President Biden blocked earlier this year came to the committee through the non-notified process in the form of a public tip. Treasury has also led a number of regulatory enhancements to CFIUS authorities over these years. Working with our partners at the Department of Defense, Treasury issued a proposed rule this month to significantly bolster CFIUS's jurisdiction over real estate transactions. We're also working to finalize the proposed rule to sharpen our investigation and enforcement tools. In many instances, our tools work best when we collaborate and act with our allies and partners. And in 2023 and 2024, CFIUS had more than 300 engagements with allies and partners. And since 2019, approximately 30 countries have proposed, enacted, or significantly expanded their foreign investment review regimes with our support. And lastly, let me update you briefly on Treasury's efforts to implement President Biden's outbound investment security program. Treasury issued a proposed rule last month for this program, and my office is working closely with the interagency to review comments and prepare a final report. This important program's success ultimately will depend on the resources we receive. And to that end, I'd ask Congress to fully support Treasury's request in the President's 25 budget for this program at $16.7 million. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Secretary Rose and Secretary Harris. Welcome.
Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. As Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Industry and Analysis, I lead a team of over 265 industry experts and economists. Our mission is to support the global competitiveness of U.S. industry. This unit, which sits in the International Trade Administration, is the analytical engine of U.S. competitiveness policy because it is the broadest industry expertise available in any one place in the U.S. government. We cover approximately 90% of the U.S. economy and work on everything from raw materials like critical minerals to vital components like semiconductors to finished goods like autos and airplanes. The unit's singular industry expertise, our unique commercial perspective, and our advanced analytics capabilities are critical to advancing U.S. government work on outbound investments, CFIUS, and supply chain resilience. With respect to outbound, Commerce plays a special role in supporting the program. Commerce is key to identifying and understanding the relevant technologies to be covered and how the requirements should be scoped. We have the technical fluency and industry relationships to help anticipate the national security risks that may be associated with cutting-edge technologies. In addition, my team has spearheaded extensive industry engagement, consulting over 450 stakeholders, working with Treasury as the development of the program has progressed. This is important as we seek to craft an effective program while reducing the risks of unintended market effects. Commerce will also be key to successful implementation. Our sector-specific experts will be indispensable to interpreting and recommending action based on analysis of the data received through the program. Turning to CFIUS, the Industry and Analysis Unit leads Commerce's participation in the committee and analyzes issues related to the U.S. business and the market in which it operates, market trends, and the business rationales for transactions, among other issues. My team works closely with colleagues across the department, especially in BIS. In 2022, President Biden directed CFIUS to consider supply chain resiliency in its national security reviews. Commerce analyzes issues such as the scale and types of supply relationships pertaining to a given U.S. company and the potential for supply chain disruptions or undue foreign influence over specific supply chains. More broadly on supply chains, the Industry and Analysis Unit has long been central to U.S. supply chain work. We've had a supply chain services-focused office for over a decade, and for years before that, a dedicated team. We focus on applied analysis and action. For instance, the Industry and Analysis Unit was the first team in the U.S. government to sound the alarm on competitiveness in the semiconductor supply chain and spring into action. The team mapped out choke points, created an early warning system, and connected industry leaders with suppliers to encourage solutions. The team also set to work supporting investments to strengthen the supply chain and was recognized for securing investments into the United States totaling $34 billion and supporting over 20,000 U.S. jobs. Last year, we established what the White House called a first-of-its-kind supply chain center. We are pioneering new data-driven tools and creating playbooks to assess supply chain vulnerabilities in specific sectors, including for emerging technologies. Our supply chain exposure tool provides a common operating picture that enables evidence-based actions with international partners. We're also building a diagnostic tool to assess supply chain risk across the U.S. economy, with an emphasis on risks to national security and economic security most relevant to the U.S. government. In conclusion, the Industry and Analysis Unit's industry expertise is vital to investment security, U.S. technological leadership, supporting domestic manufacturing and job growth, and addressing unfair trade practices by the People's Republic of China. The President's FY25 budget request for the International Trade Administration includes $5 million in new funding to support the Outbound Investment Security Program and $12 million to support our supply chain work. In finalizing the FY25 appropriation bills, we ask that you please consider how important it is for U.S. national security to support and fund these functions. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Taylor Culley, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of the committee. I am grateful for this opportunity to represent the Department of Defense today. As the first Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial-Based Policy, issues of national security and issues of economic security interlink for us in the Department of Defense. Generally, I interact with the Armed Services Committee. However, this committee has oversight over key areas of economic security that are of critical importance to DoD: CFIUS, antitrust reviews, and the Defense Production Act in particular. Through DoD's role on CFIUS, we see how adversarial capital investments in the U.S. technological base attempt to weaken the United States by robbing us of our technological know-how. Our role in Hart-Scott-Rodino antitrust reviews allows the DoD to remain vigilant to adversaries using unfair trade and predatory acquisition and investment strategies to weaken the U.S. defense industrial base. All of these remain very important priorities for the Department of Defense, as underscored in the National Defense Industrial Strategy, in support of economic deterrence and our warfighters. And while I welcome questions on any of these topics, today I will focus most of my comments on the Defense Production Act. The Defense Production Act expires in September 2025, and the Department of Defense strongly supports a 5-year reauthorization of DPA and believes that the reauthorization needs to happen this year in the NDAA or in other means, rather than risk a lapse of authorities by waiting until 2025. Why is that? Because in addition to timely, consistent appropriations and multi-year procurement authority, supporting the Defense Production Act may be one of the most important actions that Congress can take to ensure that the U.S. industrial base is ready to preserve our military advantage and support the warfighter. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Congress for expanding the definition of domestic source in the Defense Production Act to include Australia and the United Kingdom. This allows us to, in addition to working with Canada, to support and work with our allies and partners to strengthen our own industrial base as well. DoD's primary aim in the use of the Defense Production Act is to increase the readiness and resilience of the defense industrial base in support of defense-critical needs and the warfighter. Since Congress enacted the DPA in 1950, the executive branch has invoked DPA authorities to manage the nation's defense-related production capacity, our critical supply chains, and to protect and strengthen the U.S. industrial base in times of war, peace, and national emergencies. And today it remains an essential national defense tool. Make no mistake, our adversaries attempt to use supply chain vulnerabilities to weaken the U.S. economy and our military. And the DPA remains one of the most effective tools to bolster our domestic industrial production. We use the DPA Title I to prioritize components for defense systems and ensure availability of components does not preclude industry from delivering the warfighter needs in a timely and cost-effective manner. We use Title III to alleviate pain points in supply chains and expand domestic manufacturing of critical technologies and processing and production of critical minerals and strategic materials. Since the last reauthorization in 2018, DoD appropriations for DPA Title III have increased dramatically from an average of $70 million a year to about $750 million a year. Last fiscal year, we executed over $733 million of DPA Title III awards in microelectronics, strategic and critical minerals, kinetic capabilities, energy storage, and batteries. Going forward, we need to do more. And yes, Senator Scott, we also need to do so responsibly. We recently announced a Defense Industrial Base Other Transaction Authorities, a consortium that will allow DoD to expand execution of DPA awards more timely and offer more small businesses and companies that are not traditionally part of the defense industrial base to compete for awards. We continue to want to work with allies and partners through security of supply arrangements, and of course, now that we can work with Australian and UK companies as well in support of AUKUS and other in order to secure defense critical supply chains. As Congress considers reauthorization, we recommend a few changes to the DPA law, including raising the DPA fund balance to allow that annual fund balance to increase so that appropriations won't be penalized. And we like to create more executive offices in addition to our great partnership with the good people of Ohio who work for AFRL. We also support increasing the period of availability of funds, which will allow the department to support advanced procurement of material for defense critical components. Again, I'm absolutely honored to be here today representing the Department of Defense, and ultimately, I hope that our joint efforts will continue to ensure the necessary resources for our warfighters and secure our nation's economic future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Secretary Taylor-Clay. I'll begin the questioning with Senator Cortez Masto of Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for the hearing today. Assistant Secretary Taylor-Clay, let me start with you, and thank you very much for your comments. I want to commend you for the work you've been doing to develop our national defense industrial strategy. It's been really a whole of government effort, and I thank you for that. One question I have, though, is what that concerns me, and I'm seeing it across the board, is the decline of the defense workforce. Right? So there were 3 million people working U.S. defense industries in 1985. Today, it's only about 1.1 million. And as we look to strengthen the defense in the industrial base, that includes the workforce. So can you talk a little bit about what we should be considering, what DoD is doing, what are we looking, and what tools and resources are we utilizing to collaborate with federal agencies, but the private sector, and strengthening that workforce?
Thank you, ma'am. I'm glad you asked that question. Indeed, the decline of the defense workforce is a key area of risk. It is a risk for production in general, certainly for production in defense critical supply chains. As part of the National Defense Industrial Strategy, we made workforce readiness one of the 4 strategic priorities for that very reason. The Department of Defense is in implementing the strategy and developing the implementation plan. Workforce will remain a very important issue. And I'd also like to note it's not just the defense industrial-based workforce, but it's also the organic industrial-based workforce, as well as our acquisitions workforce. So we need all of them to be able to work in concert to be able to, again, bring the capabilities that our warfighters need at speed and at scale. We have a number of programs that we're developing. We've been focused on the submarine industrial-based workforce. I was just in Michigan on Monday with Secretary of the Navy Del Toro. So we were unveiling a new initiative in Michigan to help reskill and upskill workforce there, particularly automotive workers who may want to work in the submarine industrial-based workforce, so creating an additional workforce in Michigan. We continue to promote manufacturing and advance trade skills as well. Again, workforce remains of a priority and will continue to be a priority for us as we continue to want to build out the resiliency of the industrial base.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me jump to Assistant Secretary Rosen, and I want to talk a little bit about CFIUS. I welcome your proposed rulemaking, which adds the Hawthorne Army Depot in Nevada to CFIUS. A couple questions. I know you're adding 50 additional facilities as well. What factors contributed specifically to adding, if you can tell me, adding the Hawthorne Army Depot to the list?
Senator, thank you for the question and for your leadership on these issues. Of course, you mentioned Hawthorne, but there's a host of other facilities in your state that are on the list, importantly so, Nellis and others. So back in when Congress enacted FIRMA, it gave us this new real estate jurisdiction. And at the time, we worked closely with our colleagues at the Department of Defense to develop the initial list. And when I came in a couple years ago, we looked at cases and we decided, working closely with our colleagues at DoD, to take another look. And in 2023, we added 8 additional bases. And as you point out, we're in the process of adding 59 more bases. And I would defer to my colleague, Dr. Taylor Kale, for some details on this. But as a general matter, what we look to is the sophistication of what's going on at these facilities, the possibility for potential espionage, how much of it is core national security, how much of it is training. That goes into whether something should be on a list and what the range should be. And I should note that this update is the result of a broad strategic review led by my colleagues at the Department of Defense to really take a holistic view to make sure we're not leaving anything on the table in terms of plugging gaps to make sure the list is full and complete.
No, I appreciate that, and you mentioned FIRMA 2018, and I supported it, and obviously was looking at that as the security of our installations that you just mentioned in Nevada and throughout Nevada. So the collaboration is key, and it's nice to see that happening. So I thank you very much. I only have so much time left. One final thing I just want to touch on, and is Assistant Secretary Kendler, you mentioned this, is more funds. More funds for the department. My understanding is you haven't received funding an increase since 2010. And based on that, I would imagine it is challenging now because of the increased capacity of your jurisdiction and oversight to cover some of the coverage that you need with less resources. Is that one of the reasons why you're seeking an increase? I guess talk a little bit about that if you would.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. That's right. Taking inflation into account, our budget has essentially been flat for quite some time. Basically, the last decade, it's barely kept up with inflation. We do support the president's budget for fiscal year 25, which is a down payment on what we need in the Bureau of Industry and Security. If I had one ask, it would be for funds for IT modernization. We need roughly $100 million to take antiquated systems and turn them into useful, productive data and analytic support. We've had issues in providing answers to the Hill in a timely way because we don't have an updated modernization system, and we're not taking advantage of the data capabilities we have to the best of our ability. With more funds, we would enhance our technical expertise. We would work on data and analytic capabilities, and then certainly our enforcement capacity as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott, the ranking member from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kindler, I'm glad you're here. My colleagues and I have written several letters calling for your testimony and on Commerce Department's firearm export licensing policies and regulations, because unfortunately your policies appear to have all the signs of political targeting, costing the industry an estimated $500 million per year and generating no national security benefits. Case in point is the company I mentioned during my opening testimony, MG Super and Associates. I'm looking at some of the denials on these licenses, and the reason, fascinating, foreign policy pursuant to 22 CFR 120.18A1 and 2 of the ITAR, the Department of State may deny a license or other approval when the department deems such action to be in furtherance of world peace, denying a company the opportunity to sell firearms to the Ecuadorian police. Next one, same verbiage, deems it such action necessary to further world peace, denying, again, another license to sell to the Ecuadorian military. This minority business owner is Ecuadorian, cares a lot about safety in a country where his mother born and raised. Another one, furtherance of world peace. It is not only frustrating and exacerbating, but challenging to see this over and over and over and over again. Your firearm policy has resulted in over $71 million in licenses canceled for this company, meaning they've lost their contracts and they've lost the ability to support the police and the military across the Western Hemisphere. That does not mean that the Ecuadorian police did not find another channel. Of course, they went to Brazil, Czech Republic, and China to get these orders backfilled. You haven't prevented the sale of firearms. You've merely used a political tactic to harm an American business. What's even worse is that it, to me, appears to be political targeting. The International Trade Association, under your leadership, has stopped this company, but allowed competitors in some of our nation's poorest areas to not be able to effectively create jobs, not be able to effectively produce a world-class competitive product and have a market to sell it to, because you're trying to further world peace. Thoughts?
Senator, I really appreciate you bringing up this topic, and
I'm not sure you do, but I think this is an important topic that reinforces this administration's philosophical approach to trying to shut down or cut off gun manufacturing in our own country.
I do appreciate you bringing it up, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we're trying to accomplish and what our rules have actually done. Our focus is on protecting national security, full stop. We tailored the rule. Our presumption of denial in this rule is tailored to ensure that U.S. lawfully exported firearms don't end up in the hands of criminals, gangs, cartels, terrorists.
May I ask you a question there? Is there evidence that his company's firearms sold to the military and to the police have not been received by the military or police? Is there something specific about this transaction or the other three that were denied?
Senator, I'm not in a position to speak to a specific company's situation, but I certainly feel sorry for your constituent, and I'd like to follow up with you. in an environment where we can talk about a specific company. But let me be clear, our presumption of denial, it only applies to non-government entities in the 36 countries designated by state as high risk. So if these transactions are with government entities, that is not the subject of our presumption of denial.
Thank you. Let me just say, I think words mean things. Ecuadorian police, Ecuadorian military, Colombian military.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Secretary Taylor Calais, the current DPA reauthorization expires next year, as you know. Senator Ranking Member Scott and I filed an NDA amendment that would extend the DPA. Describe, if you would, why it's a critical tool that needs to be reauthorized and how DOD uses its authorities.
Thank you, sir. Again, as you noted, DPA reauthorization is a priority for the Department of Defense. We use the DPA, all 3 titles, daily. A lapse would ultimately impact our warfighter needs and the ability of our, particularly our industrial base, to address some of the long lead items, long lead times for critical defense components, and would ultimately, again, impact our warfighter. Annually, we use Title I over 300,000 times to prioritize and allocate some of these urgent defense critical components and resolve supply chain issues. Without reauthorization by next year, we wouldn't be able to do that. We also, use Title I really at no cost to the taxpayer. A lapse would impact our prioritizations, not just for us, but also with our allies and partners. We have over 20 security of supply arrangements with key partners and allies across the globe. Those security of supply arrangements have been used with Israel. They've been used for Ukraine. With Title III, would also impact industry. It will impact small businesses. 40% of our Title III DPA awards go to small businesses and non-traditional defense suppliers. We're using the Defense Production Act Title III to expand and bring more non-traditional companies into the defense ecosystem. Without Title III awards and the reauthorization of DPA title in general, we wouldn't be able to do that very important work.
Thank you. Secretary Rosen, 2018 Congress gave CFIUS the authority to require mandatory filings of foreign investments in critical technologies, as you know. Since then, we've seen increasing attempts by malign actors to target U.S. critical infrastructure. It's why I'm pushing to give CFIUS the ability to require mandatory filings. We need to know about these investments. It should not be optional. We filed an amendment to NDAA to do this. Would CFIUS talk through whether CFIUS would be able to better protect the U.S. from dangerous foreign investment if it had the ability to require these mandatory filings for transactions related to infrastructure?
Senator Chairman, thank you for that question and for your leadership on these issues throughout. You bring up critical infrastructure. It's a core component of what FIRMA was all about. It's also a core component of what CFIUS reviews and looks at on a regular basis. It is true that certain filings of critical infrastructure investments are mandatory. And I think the more, as a general matter, we want to make sure that we are seeing investments into places like critical infrastructure that raise national security risk. I think the challenge is figuring out how do you do that in a way that mandatorily requires what we need to see, what we want to see, but sort of weeds out some of the broader noise. And I think there's ways that we can do that through regulations and otherwise. And so we're committed to working with you on that effort, and we appreciate you spearheading that.
Thank you. Secretary Harris, the administration's taken steps to establish a targeted program to ensure outbound U.S. investment doesn't strengthen China's ability to develop certain critical technologies. Describe, and as you know, Senator Casey and Cornyn have led a bipartisan effort to codify an outbound outbound investment program. Why, talk to us, if you describe why the administration has taken a sector-based approach in its outbound investment program.
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. We're trying to take a very deliberate and narrow and tailored approach to address a national security risk, and that is certain outbound investments supporting the development of certain sensitive technologies in a country of concern. That is U.S. venture capital or private equity supporting the development of, say, sensitive semiconductor technology or AI-related applications in a Chinese startup. We've been consulting very broadly with hundreds of stakeholders throughout the development of this program, and our belief is that with this sectoral approach as we define it, it can be most administrable and most impactful, but also most narrow. Our goal here is to address that tailored threat while minimizing broader unintended impacts.
Thank you. Senator Van Hollen is recognized from Maryland. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. We have a appropriations subcommittee hearing markup going on. Thank all of you for what you're doing, both to strengthen our economy, but also protect our national security at the same time. And I do want to just pick up on a couple of the questions that the chairman asked, first with regard to the outbound investment screening. And I applaud the administration's leadership on this issue, working with our G7 partners and trying to design this in a way that you just said, Mr. Harris, was well-tailored. I returned from a trip last week to a number of countries, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. There's a voracious appetite for U.S. technology, especially in AI, but also other sectors. But if we're going to be successful in terms of targeted outbound investment screening, starting with the notification provisions, we obviously need our allies who are also in strong positions to provide investment in technology to cooperate fully, right? Otherwise, we can shut the front door of the barn but leave the back one open. Can you talk about the progress we're making getting some of our partners, whether it's the EU or others in East Asia, Japan, South Korea, to adopt similar measures with respect to outbound investment?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And I'll quickly pull in Assistant Secretary Rosen as well, and with Treasury's role in leading the program. I would say from a commerce perspective, though, we've been, with Treasury and the State Department, very focused on working with allies and partners. We're in a situation where we've identified a threat and we need to take action, and we're doing so. But we want this to be as inclusive and as broad as possible and have as many partners and allies share our perspective and take their own actions.
I appreciate that. No, I was going to ask you, Mr. Rosen, as well. I know this is your portfolio at Treasury.
Thank
If you could just speak specifically, not to the goals of enlisting support from our allies, but whether we're making substantial progress on that front and what more needs to be done.
Senator, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the sort of the backfill thing that we're focused on. I would say we're making progress, we're engaged, and we're committed to continuing that engagement. I do think that a number of allies and partners are studying the issue to assess whether within their own economies they are similarly worried about the export of their dollars, of their know-how in the same way we are. So I think we're getting different responses as a result, but I'm encouraged by some of the statements that you alluded to, and it's an effort we're not going to give up on.
I appreciate it. I just think we need to really, really push here. Otherwise, we'll be, in some ways, putting restrictions, handcuffs on our own company's investment when others are free to do so. Under the jurisdiction of the Department of Commerce, Mr. Kendler, and specifically related to some of the machines that are used to manufacture very high-end chips for semiconductors, the United States has been very clear that we want to protect what we call the small garden, our crown jewels, but high walls. This also requires our partners' engagement. So, for example, when it comes to some of the machines to help manufacture high-end semiconductors, we've worked with ASML and Tokyo Electron. My understanding is that there may not be the progress that we'd anticipated earlier. So my question to you is, when and if would the United States want to apply the foreign direct product rule in order to ensure compliance with our goals? I don't know which of the two. Okay.
I'll take that, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the Bureau of Industry and Security at the Commerce Department, multilateral coordination is crucial to export controls, full stop. We're constantly building export control coalitions around the world on different critical and emerging technologies like semiconductors. The Dutch and the Japanese, as you alluded to, they impose their independent controls on semiconductor manufacturing tools. They're comparable to ours, that what we picked up last October in our amended controls. And that's a critical part of our work, ensuring that our allies and partners writ large understand the threat, that they understand what it means if we don't have controls in place. That's a fundamental of the coalition we built to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's a fundamental of how we're approaching quantum and other issues, as I alluded to in my opening statement. It's critical to us to keep that going.
If you could, I asked specifically when and if we would apply the foreign direct product rule, which is obviously an escalatory measure, but one that may help get people's attention to secure their cooperation. Could you speak to that?
We have increasingly applied the foreign direct product rule, which captures certain foreign produced equipment under our regulations. We have increasingly used that as a tool. It is a heavy measure. Happy to talk to you about when and what circumstances might be appropriate.
I would appreciate following up on that. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
President.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosen, and thanks to all of you for being here. Mr. Rosen, NVIDIA makes probably the most advanced artificial intelligence chips, does it not?
NVIDIA does produce advanced chips, yes, Senator.
And those chips are highly coveted because they can perform the massive computations needed to train AI systems, don't they?
I believe so, yes, Senator.
Yeah. And we have export controls on those chips, do we not?
We do, and that's a process led by my colleague,
Right.
Ms. Kendler.
And we prohibit those chips from being sold to China. Is that correct?
I don't know exactly what chips are prohibited, defer to Ms. Kendler, but I know there are controls on the export.
You don't know
advanced-
whether the advanced NVIDIA artificial intelligence chips are prohibited from being sold to China?
So, Senator, my understanding is that they are, but that is export controls. It lies with my colleague at the Department of Commerce.
So how come we're selling them? We're allowing them to be sold to China.
Senator, I would respectfully defer. I don't oversee export controls. I oversee inbound investment into the United States.
Well, you control investment security, don't you?
I do, and as
All right, let me ask Ms. Kendler. How come we're allowing them to be sold to China?
Senator, our advanced computing controls from last October and the October before, they're absolutely targeted at the most advanced chips, as you noted. We are controlling them for export to China, and we look together with Department of Defense, Energy, and State at where they're going.
Yes, ma'am, but if you go on the internet, you'll find 70 distributors, not 70 distributors, which will sell NVIDIA's supposedly restricted chips to China. And in fact, some of them will sell to China the entire servers. They cost about $300,000 a piece. They've got 8 chips in them. Isn't that a fact?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the website that you're referring to, but what I can tell you,
I'm referring to 70. Do you read the Wall Street Journal?
on occasion, yes.
You should read this article. They've identified at least 70 distributors, and they have confirmed that these chips are being sold to China.
Senator,
I mean, this is very disturbing. one estimate, not according to the Center for a New American Security, it estimates that the median number of A1 chips being sold already to China at 12,500. Isn't that correct?
Senator, any diversion of our controls would be a matter for export enforcement, and we are tracking that very closely.
But you're not aware that 12,500 have been sold?
Senator, we track all sorts of data through our analytic capabilities to understand illicit procurement networks. That's very important to our work.
But you don't
it's something
know
we're
about this
cracking down on.
12,500?
I can't speak to the specific report that you're referring to, sir.
Well, you need to read the paper. No disrespect. These chips have been sold, and it's been confirmed, to China's most elite universities. They've been sold to the state research powerhouse, Chinese Academy of Science, haven't they? Do you know anything about that?
Senator, we look at license applications and determine whether they're consistent with national security. If it's not consistent with national security, we do not approve it.
Well, all you got to do is go on, get your computer out, and go on Google and search. And you'll find 70 distributors that are selling these restricted chips that you're not shutting down. And the Wall Street Journal has confirmed all of this.
Sir, we would add entities like that to our entity list as a regulatory action. We would also
But you haven't done it yet.
We would also have our enforcement colleagues investigate these kinds of allegations.
Were you aware of this before I raised it today?
Senator, I certainly am aware that when our laws are effective, illicit procurement networks stand up to violate them.
Were you aware of these 70 distributors and the thousands and thousands that have been sold right there on the internet in front of God and country, bigger than Dallas? Was your agency in charge of enforcing this aware of that?
Senator, I'd be happy to connect you with our enforcement team to talk about this in more detail.
Team?
Yes, sir.
I mean, who's on first? What's on second? We've got export controls here. And all you got to do is go on the internet, and China buys them.
The export...
Are you aware? Were you aware of this before I raised it today?
Senator Kennedy, you've made your point clear. I share your concerns. I think this is one reason why BIS needs more funds. Senator Smith from Minnesota is recognized.
Well, can I just say one more point?
You certainly may.
I don't think they need more money.
Well,
I think they need people that talk to each other and know how to use an internet and know how to read articles in the Wall Street Journal. This is not, you don't have to be an astrophysicist here.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Brown, and thanks to all of you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'd like to direct my first question to Assistant Secretary Taylor Colley, if I may. The recent disastrous CrowdStrike incident, I think, exposed the alarming vulnerabilities that can result when too many critical systems and capabilities are dependent on a single source component. And that faulty software update crashed. It apparently crashed over 8 million Windows devices. I mean, airlines were crippled, banking systems, hospitals. It was a mess. A lot of people paid the price for that. My question is, the DoD's industrial-based strategy includes efforts to reduce the risks associated with overdependence on a single or potentially adversarial source for national critical capabilities. I'm wondering, how is the DoD thinking about the national security risks that can stem from instances like the crowdsource outage, where there's vulnerability from a single-sourced product that can crash critical systems?
Ma'am, thank you for that question. Single sources of in our supply chains, in our particular defense critical supply chains, remains a huge, incredible risk for our industrial base and for the Department of Defense. In general, for us being able to provide our warfighters with the capabilities that they need at speed and at scale. An issue like the one that you raised with CrowdStrike is one that obviously we we all experience. I experienced it myself personally on Monday trying to leave Michigan. But in general, we address sort of our supply chain issues, looking at broadly, looking across the board. We also, through our chief information officer, look at cyber threats in particular, and I want to emphasize the importance of cyber as part of the sources of risk to our industrial base, particularly to manufacturers and as well. As part of the umbrella of the National Defense Industrial Strategy, CIO also issued the the DoD Defense Industrial Base Cyber Strategy as well. So we continue to look very closely at these and look at ways in which they affect particularly the defense industrial base and how we can intervene.
Thank you. I appreciate your response. I think it was just sort of impossible for most Americans to believe that everything could just be so screwed up because of one software update gone awry. And I think when you think about what that might mean for other, highly important systems that we rely on for so many other things, it's really concerning. I want to ask you another question. This one has to do with on drug onshoring. So the FDA tells us that nearly 70% of the ingredients in medications that Americans take are sourced overseas, mostly India and China, and the finished drug supply is also heavily reliant on overseas supply chains, again, mostly from India and China. So could you talk about what the risks are that are posed by this reliance on foreign manufactured drugs, especially medications like antibiotics, what impact that has on military readiness and civilian health, and what tools does the Department of Defense have to promote domestic manufacturing of these critical medical products?
Ma'am, I want to underline the concerns that you raise, particularly with pharmaceuticals and the effect that they have on our supply chains and ultimately to our warfighters. I don't, in my purview, handle these issues within the Department of Defense, but I also want to note that Mr. Harris also does within the Commerce Department. He may have something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Senator. We absolutely share your concern that we need to be focused on where there are dependencies, where there are single sources of supply, and we have an urgent need to be more proactive and strategic in our approach to supply chains. We all collectively learned lessons in the pandemic, but it's not just about where the market might not function or where the supply might be too brittle of a supply chain. There are also national and economic security risks in these supply chains. You noted a perfect example. Americans expect every day that they would have what they need in the medicine cabinet or on the kitchen table, and the supply chains are what gets those products to point. My team in the Commerce Department and in the new supply chain center that we've created, we've been working with the Health and Human Services Agency and others to try to assess the data and identify what is of greatest concern and who do we need to work with to try to improve resiliency in that supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I just note that I have two bipartisan bills to address this issue, one with Senator Cassidy, which would provide fundings to antibiotics manufacturers to bring those factories back to the United States, and the second with Senator Cotton would provide incentives to drug manufacturers to produce finished drugs here in the United States by providing higher reimbursement for those products. I look forward to working on those proposals with any of my colleagues who are interested.
Thanks, Senator Smith. Senator Brett from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank each of you for being here today. We appreciate it. Look, we all know the ever-growing threat that is posed by the Chinese Communist Party. And whether the CCP, no matter what they're doing, undermining the American worker, stealing intellectual property, buying up our farmland, they have demonstrated a disregard for international rules. So when we are looking at that, it seriously doesn't matter if it's trade, if it's intellectual property, anything standing in their way, they're willing to just bulldoze straight through that. And American companies across every single sector of our economy are under pressure as a result. So I'm looking at AI, computing, energy, robotics, just influence or attempts to influence our institutions, the buying up of farmland. We could go on and on and on. The Chinese Communist Party is going to stop at nothing until they achieve their ultimate goal and they upend international order. So using the tools at our disposal, whether it's export controls, CFIUS, or sanctions, we must pursue a strategy that strikes the right balance between protecting U.S. industry and businesses and hardworking Americans from the threats that are imposed by the Chinese Communist Party and other adversaries, while also allowing our economy and capital markets to thrive and to remain dominant. On this, a recent New York Fed report raised questions about the effect of unilateral export control policies. The report highlights the unintended consequences like lost revenue to U.S. firms, loss of stock market capitalization for U.S. companies, and worse yet, unintentionally propelling Chinese firms to innovate and develop and advance technologies in-house. In that end, the American consumer is the one that pays the price, and that is who I am concerned about. Mrs. Kendler, how do you think we strike the balance between cutting off China's access to our critical technologies while also ensuring American consumers don't pay the ultimate price?
Thank you, Senator. This is a question that we struggle with every day. Our focus is on maintaining national security. That comes before all.
Good.
But part of national security is U.S. technological leadership. And so I think the first thing I'd point you to is the multilateral approach to export controls and the calibrated approach to export controls. So such as in our semiconductor controls where we've targeted the most advanced chips, we're not trying to unduly interfere with business that doesn't cause a national security risk. We're trying to target our controls and create them in a way, together with our interagency partners, that attacks the most important need. The danger of not using multilateral controls is that we may fail, where we're damming half the river if it's only the United States imposing controls and not our partners and allies or other supply countries. We're also potentially incentivizing foreign companies to design out U.S. components as they manufacture goods. So this is something we pay a great deal of attention to as we don't take our eye off the national security ball.
Well, and in that vein, unfortunately, since it was reauthorized in 2018, the Defense Production Act has become increasingly used. You've seen President Biden and Vice President Harris, again, acting out of the bounds of congressional intent, this time using it to further the Green New Deal agenda and by boasting productions of things like solar panel parts. Using the Defense Production Act for partisan priorities that have little to do with national security undermines the critical use of that tool and the way that it was intended to essentially give our nation the ability to defend ourselves and our allies. We are considering reauthorization ahead of 2025, and we need to ensure that it's actually being appropriately utilized. And so, Mrs. Taylor-Kell, I understand you recently released the first National Defense Industrial Strategy. Can you share with us the status of implementation? And more broadly, what is the state of the industrial base and ensuring that our warfighters are properly equipped?
Thank you, ma'am. I want to emphasize again that the Department of Defense strongly supports the reauthorization of the Defense Production Act. We use the Defense Production Act daily, all three titles, to make sure that our supply chains, our defense critical supply chains, are secure. Last year, FY23 alone, we invested $733 million in critical minerals, microelectronics, and other areas where there are gaps in our supply chains. We very strongly see the importance of this. With respect to some of the investments that you mentioned, I can again only speak to Department of Defense investments that I oversee, and I refer you to other agencies, and particularly Department of Energy or HHS.
Right, but the warfighter specifically.
And that is how we use the Defense Production Act within the Department of Defense. Again, it's to address long lead times of critical materials, for instance, materials that go into rare earth elements, that go into the F-35, for instance. We use the Defense Production Act daily to support the warfighter.
Thank you.
Senator Warnock of Georgia is recognized.
Thank you so very much, Chair Brown. I don't believe that giant American corporations should get richer by selling their technologies to authoritarian regimes or human rights abusers. And that's why I was glad to see the Biden-Harris administration take steps in 2021 to further center human rights in U.S. foreign policy through the Export Controls and Human Rights Initiative, an effort aimed at curbing the misuse of American technology by repressive governments and regimes whose human rights record we rightly deplore. 25 nations have signed on to the initiative's code of conduct, leading to more of our allies considering human rights when reviewing their exports of technologies that can perpetuate human rights abuses. We don't want to make the trampling of human rights efficient. Ms. Kindler, can you highlight some successes from the Export Controls and Human Rights Initiative and how they contribute to efforts to combat authoritarian regimes?
Senator, thank you for this question. Human rights is front and center in how we consider export controls. The ECRI, as we know it, the Export Control and Human Rights Initiative, has been very helpful in bringing together countries that share values, even when they don't have export control systems of their own. And it's enabled a dialogue that is desperately needed for our national security and foreign policy. Just today, the Commerce Department released a proposed rule that's connected to ECRI. We're looking at foreign security end users in countries of concern, authoritarian countries, like you note, to ensure that U.S. U.S. persons are not supporting jail operators, foreign police, and that sort of thing. And that is a proposed rule. We're seeking industry comment, but it is connected to ECRI in the sense that it moves our human rights protections forward. We've also been very active at the Commerce Department in adding entities to our entity list, requiring specific licenses for companies and other organizations that may be involved in human rights abuses, in contrary to U.S. national security and foreign policy.
So it's important in terms of the advancing of our own values and our commitment to human rights. But could you say more about why it's important that the United States of America lead in this space? My sense and core belief is that there is no replacement for American leadership in the world. It's indispensable. And can you say more about the geopolitical implications of us leading in this space?
U.S. technology is the best in the world. We need to take a leadership role to ensure that it's not used in a way that is contrary to our values. And by taking that stance and working with our allies through multilateral regimes, plurilateral regimes, bilateral relationships, we can bring others into that fold. And there are many countries around the world who do share our values and who are looking at things like facial recognition systems and saying that may be appropriate in an airport context. It is not appropriate when you're surveilling minority populations in Xinjiang or Tibet.
So you would say that the United States is uniquely positioned to lead in this space, and would you also say that it has national security implications for us?
Yes, Senator, I would.
Are additional congressional authorities necessary to expand and improve the efficacy of these initiatives?
Senator, there's several ways where we could bring in technical expertise into the Bureau of Industry and Security. One thing that comes to mind is a highly qualified experts program that we are seeking authority for. We could bring in experts on a temporary basis into the Bureau of Industry and Security who know these technologies well. That's an area where we'd welcome an opportunity to obtain additional authorization and resources. We'd also look at some provisions in our regulations like remote access and the opportunity to control access to data centers and other high-end advanced technology. That's an area where expansion of our authorities under ECRA would be helpful.
Well, thank you so much. There are more questions that I could ask, but maybe we can follow up later. But I'm grateful that the Biden-Harris administration understands that export controls can be an effective tool to combat authoritarian regimes. This is important in this moment, especially when you look at the geopolitical situation, the effort by some to advance a kind of authoritarian approach, both internationally and I would say domestically. So thank you for your work. As surveillance technology continues to improve, we must ensure American corporations are not making money from authoritarian regimes and human rights abusers. All of us have a stake in that project. Thank you very much.
Senator Warnock. Senator Warren from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, reviews foreign investments in our country to make sure they don't pose a risk to national security. Increasingly, foreign companies are building crypto mining facilities on U.S. soil. These mines are actually warehouses stuffed with computers that process crypto transactions and produce new crypto tokens. They're loud, they're hot, and they suck up a ton of electricity, which can crash the power grid. And that's why many countries have banned crypto mining, leading more foreign companies to set up shop here in the United States. According to a blockchain analytics firm, today 1/3 of crypto mining facilities in the U.S. are owned by citizens of the People's Republic of China, including people with direct ties to the Chinese government. Now, crypto mining is a disaster for the environment, and it can pose national security risks as well. In May, at CFIUS's recommendation, President Biden issued an order requiring the Chinese national owners of a crypto mining facility in Wyoming called Mine One to divest their ownership and remove the crypto mining equipment from the premises. Assistant Secretary Rosen, you're the head of CFIUS, so you oversaw the investigation into Mine One and told the president that the divestment was essential. The divestment order cited two primary factors. One, the technology inside Mine One could be used for surveillance. And two, Mine One was located 1 mile from a strategic missile base housing intercontinental ballistic missiles. So I want to ask you, could the equipment inside that crypto mine have been used to spy on our military operations and our nuclear weapons system?
Senator, thank you for the question, and I think pointing out this case in particular, I'm limited in terms of what I can say about this particular transaction, but to answer your question, there is a generalized concern that sophisticated equipment in proximity to sensitive facilities can be used for espionage.
Okay, so can be used for espionage. Foreign adversaries are using crypto mines to spy on U.S. military operations. That's an obvious national security risk, but it isn't the only risk. Foreign-owned crypto mines also threaten our energy grid. According to an analysis by the New York Times, Bitcoin mines in the U.S. owned by Chinese nationals use enough energy to power 1.5 million homes. National security experts have warned that foreign-owned crypto mining facilities' connection to our energy grid could leave the U.S. vulnerable to targeted blackouts and cyber attacks. Assistant Secretary Rosen, if China or another foreign country had the power to crash a significant portion of our country's power infrastructure, could that threaten our national security?
Senator, of course, an impact on our energy sector, our energy resources, our energy supply chain could very much have a national security impact.
All right. There is yet another risk as well. foreign nationals have been able to buy up crypto mines in the United States in secret. How? By paying in crypto. Crypto allows them to bypass our traditional banking system and the anti-money laundering rules that are supposed to prevent any anonymous foreign money from coming into the U.S. In fact, that is exactly how a Chinese investor was able to secretly buy a $6 million crypto mine in Texas. It is also how U.S.-based crypto mines have been able to secretly send millions of dollars back to China. Assistant Secretary Rosen, do you agree that we need to plug the holes in our anti-money laundering rules that have allowed foreign nationals to secretly buy U.S. crypto mining facilities or make other kinds of investments in the U.S. without our knowing about it?
Senator, I certainly share your concern about ultimate beneficial ownership and making sure that we know who is doing the buying. I can speak for the CFIUS context. When we look at a transaction or try to find a transaction, that's a critical component to our diligence.
All right. Crypto mines could be used by our adversaries to spy on our military bases or to bring down our power grid or to move money in and out of the country in secret. Last year, the Treasury Department requested additional tools from Congress to prevent China, Iran, Russia, and other foreign countries from using crypto to evade sanctions and launder dirty money. It is time for us to pass the laws that Treasury needs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Not unrelated to her comments, yesterday I introduced the CAR Act to be proactive and stay ahead of the threat that Chinese connected vehicles pose to our national security and to Americans' privacy. Another threat that we have the chance to meet now early before there are more Chinese connected vehicles on our streets. Ms. Kendler, I hope you and your colleagues will work with me on that effort. Thank you to the witnesses today. For senators who wish to submit questions, for the record, those questions are due 1 week from today, Thursday, August 1st. To the witnesses, you have 45 days to respond to any questions. Thank you again. The committee is adjourned.